The helicopter blades whirred deafeningly overhead as Elliot Ashford gripped the edge of his Italian leather seat, knuckles white with tension. Through the tinted windows of his private chopper, he could see 3 black sedans racing along the mountain road below, trailing his aircraft like hungry wolves. "Sir, I've rerouted us to the secondary estate in Geneva," his pilot's voice crackled through the headset. "Your security team believes these are the same paparazzi from the Milan incident." Elliot sighed, loosening his custom Brioni tie. At 34, he'd become one of the world's youngest tech billionaires after his social media privacy app, FortressNet, had gone public last year. Since then, his life had transformed into an endless parade of fake smiles, business proposals, thinly disguised as friendship offers, and women who seemed suspiciously interested in his net worth rather than his character. "No, Dominic. Take me to Brooklyn," Elliot said suddenly, a plan forming in his mind as rapidly as one of his coding solutions. "Brooklyn, sir? You don't have a property there?" "Exactly." 3 hours later, Elliot stood in a modest Brooklyn apartment he'd leased through a shell company last month, an experiment in anonymous living he hadn't yet found the courage to try. The sparse furnishings and water-stained ceiling were a stark contrast to his usual surroundings of minimalist luxury. He walked to the bathroom mirror and stared at his reflection. Designer stubble, perfectly coiffed dark hair, and eyes that had grown increasingly hollow despite the billions in his accounts. With determined movements, he took out a pair of scissors and began cutting his signature hairstyle, watching as pieces fell into the sink. Time to find out who Elliot Ashford really is, when the world doesn't know he's Elliot Ashford, he murmured to his reflection. His phone buzzed. It was Miranda Winters, his hard-edged but fiercely loyal COO. "Elliot, where the hell are you? The board is having conniptions, and you've got the Masterson merger presentation in 3 days." "I need some time, Miranda," he replied, applying drugstore hair dye to his now choppy hair. "Cover for me. Tell them I'm dealing with a personal matter." "Personal matter? You don't have personal matters. You have investments, acquisitions, and the occasional yacht party." "Maybe that's the problem," Elliot replied, surprising both of them with his candor. "I'm taking 2 weeks. No negotiations." After a lengthy silence, Miranda sighed. "Fine, 2 weeks. But I'm not dealing with Masterson's ego if this falls apart." "You're the best, Miranda." "I know. Don't do anything stupid." "Too late, Elliot," thought as he surveyed his transformation. With dyed brown hair, glasses with clear lenses, and thrift store clothes, he looked like any other struggling young professional in Brooklyn. He'd left his luxury watches, designer clothes, and even his high-end smartphone behind. For the next 2 weeks, Elliot Ashford would become Eli Adams, a freelance web developer trying to make ends meet. No driver, no private chef, no assistant, anticipating his every need. Just a man seeking something authentic in a life that had become as carefully curated as his public image. As he stepped onto the bustling Brooklyn street, the evening sun painted the buildings in golden hues. For the first time in years, no one gave him a second glance. No one wanted anything from him. The anonymity was both terrifying and intoxicating. He spotted a neighborhood cafe across the street, the Inkwell, with a hand-painted sign and mismatched chairs visible through the window. A bulletin board outside advertised open mic night and local art exhibitions. "Good a place as any to start being normal," he muttered, waiting for the light to change. Little did he know that pushing open that cafe door would change his life forever, setting in motion events that would challenge everything he thought he knew about wealth, happiness, and love. The moment Elliot, now Eli, stepped into the salle, Inkwell, warmth enveloped him. Not the sterile warmth of his climate-controlled mansions, but the genuine warmth of people living their lives without calculation. The cafe smelled of fresh ground coffee, old books, and possibility. "You looking to stand there all day? Or were you planning to order something?" Eli turned toward the voice and felt something shift inside him. Behind the counter stood a woman with wild copper curls barely contained by a bandana, freckles scattered across her nose like constellations, and eyes so green they seemed to challenge the very concept of the color. For a man who regularly negotiated billion-dollar deals without breaking a sweat, Eli suddenly found himself struggling for words. The woman, Zoe, according to her name tag, raised an eyebrow. First time at a coffee shop? It's pretty straightforward. You tell me what you want, I make it, you pay me. Revolutionary concept. A snort of laughter escaped from the man next to Eli in line. Don't mind Zoe. She saves her charm for regular customers and stray cats. Zoe rolled her eyes. Ignore Marcus. He thinks being my landlord gives him the right to psychoanalyze me. Her gaze returned to Eli. So, what'll it be, newbie? Whatever you recommend. Eli managed, realizing he'd never ordered coffee without an assistant handling the transaction. Zoe studied him for a moment, her eyes narrowing slightly. You look like a man who's been drinking pretentious coffee to impress other people who drink pretentious coffee. She smiled, and Eli felt his breath catch. Let me make you something you'll actually enjoy. As she turned to the espresso machine, Marcus leaned toward Eli. You new to the neighborhood? There's an empty desk at my co-working space if you need one. I run Collective Creative 2 blocks over. Thanks, Eli said, surprised by the casual offer. I'm Eli, just moved here. I do web development. Perfect timing, Marcus replied. We lost our tech guy last month. Stop by tomorrow, first weeks. Free for neighbors. By the time Eli reached the counter again, Zoe was placing a simple ceramic mug before him. House specialty. We call it reality check. Strong enough to wake you up but won't make you a coffee snob. Their fingers brushed as Eli handed over cash, and he felt a jolt that had nothing to do with caffeine. He took his drink to a corner table and observed the cafe with fascination. A group of students argued passionately about film theory. An elderly couple shared a scone in comfortable silence. 2 women in business attire reviewed documents with intense focus. Everyone existed in their own world, unconcerned with his. The sensation was strangely liberating. Is the seat taken? Eli looked up to find a paint-splattered woman gesturing to the chair across from him. In his normal life, people waited for an invitation before approaching. No, please, he said, quickly moving his laptop. I'm Phoebe, she said, settling down with a sketchbook. Sorry to invade, but it's packed, and you looked least likely to try making small talk. Is that a compliment? Absolutely. I'm preparing for my first gallery showing, and chatty people are the enemy of deadline-driven artists. She glanced at his laptop. You're safe, though. You've got that focused coder energy. An hour passed with comfortable silence between them, broken occasionally by Phoebe's questions about color composition or Eli's requests for user interface feedback. It was the most natural interaction he'd had in years. When Zoe appeared to clear their cups, she glanced at Phoebe's sketches. These for the winter exhibition? If I don't have a nervous breakdown first, Phoebe confirmed. They're hiring event staff, Zoe mentioned, then turned to Eli. The Brooklyn Arts Center hosts this huge winter showcase. Half the neighborhood is either exhibiting or working it. They still need tech support for the interactive installations, Phoebe added. The pay's terrible, but the networking's worth it. Before he could think better of it, Eli found himself saying, I could help with that. Both women looked at him with interest, and Eli wondered what he was getting himself into. His alter ego had existed for less than a day, and already he was volunteering for a community art show, something the real Elliot Ashford would have sent a donation to avoid attending. As closing time approached, Eli gathered his things, surprised by how quickly the evening had passed. When he reached the door, Zoe called out, See you tomorrow, reality check? With a smile he couldn't suppress, Eli nodded. Wouldn't miss it. Walking back to his Spartan apartment, Eli felt strangely alive. In a single evening at the inkwell, He'd had more genuine connections than he'd experienced in the past year of exclusive galas and business functions. Meanwhile, across town, Miranda Winters paced her office, staring at the tabloid headline on her tablet. Tech titan Ashford missing, billion-dollar deal in jeopardy. With a groan, she dialed a number she rarely used. "Calvin? It's Miranda. I need your discretion on this. Find Elliot, but keep it quiet. I don't care what he's doing or who he's doing it with, but in exactly 12 days, I need him back in a suit and ready to charm Masterson." She paused. "And Calvin, if the board gets wind of this, we're both looking for new jobs." As she hung up, little did she know that Elliot Ashford had already begun a journey that would make returning to his old life more difficult than anyone could imagine. 3 days into his new life, Eli found himself standing on a ladder in the Brooklyn Arts Center, attempting to fix the lighting system for the interactive digital art installation, while Phoebe directed from below. "A little to the left," she called, her hands framing the scene as if capturing it on film. The projection needs to hit the corner of the sculpture. "If I go any more left, I'll be in Queens," Eli quipped, stretching to adjust the mounting bracket. In his regular life, he'd have simply hired someone to handle this, or donated enough to have the entire building renamed after him. Now, with his fingers cramping and dust in his hair, he was surprised to find himself enjoying the challenge. "Perfect!" Phoebe exclaimed, as the light finally illuminated the installation correctly. "You're saving my life, Eli. The tech guy they hired originally said this was impossible without specialized equipment." Eli climbed down, wiping his hands on his now well-worn jeans. "Sometimes the simplest solutions work best." "Speaking of simple solutions," Phoebe said with a sly smile, "Zoe's bringing coffee for the volunteers in 5 minutes, and that information is relevant because—" Eli tried to sound casual, even as he ran a hand through his hair. "Because you've found a reason to visit the inkwell every day since you moved here. And it's not for my sparkling company or Marcus's business advice." She raised her eyebrows meaningfully. "For someone who writes code, you're not exactly subtle about your algorithms." Before Eli could formulate a denial, the gallery doors opened and Zoe entered, balancing a carrier of coffee cups. Unlike her usual cafe attire, she wore a vintage dress with combat boots, an incongruous combination that somehow perfectly captured her essence. "Caffeine delivery for the art martyrs," she announced, setting down the carrier. When she spotted Eli, her professional smile softened into something more genuine. "Well, if it isn't reality check, didn't figure you for the volunteer type." "I'm full of surprises," Eli replied, accepting the coffee she offered. Their hands touched again, and this time the contact lingered a moment longer than necessary. "Apparently so," Zoe said, studying him with curious eyes. "You know, for a web developer, you've got an impressive knowledge of structural engineering." "My father was in construction," Eli improvised, immediately feeling guilty about the lie. His actual father had been a hedge fund manager who considered physical labor beneath the Ashford dignity. "My dad was a carpenter," Zoe shared, her expression softening. "He taught me to build things before I could read. Said understanding how things come together helps when life takes them apart." For a moment, they stood in comfortable silence, a connection forming that had nothing to do with status or wealth. "Anyway," Zoe continued, breaking the spell, "I'm bartending at the opening reception tomorrow night. You should stop by. As staff, you get free drinks, which makes even terrible art look fascinating." "I'll be there," Eli promised, wondering how he'd become so eager for approval from a woman who made coffee for a living. After Zoe departed, Eli returned to work with renewed energy. As evening approached, he checked his burner phone and found a message from Marcus. "Meeting potential investors tonight. Could use your tech expertise as backup. 8 p.m. Oak and Vine. Wear something that doesn't look like you slept in it." Eli arrived at the upscale restaurant feeling strangely nervous. He'd negotiated billion-dollar deals over dinners far more exclusive than this. But tonight he was representing skills rather than wealth. A novel experience. The maitre d' led him to a private dining room where Marcus sat with two men in expensive suits. With a jolt, Eli recognized Victor Chen, a venture capitalist he'd played golf with last month. "Eli?" Marcus waved him over. "This is Victor and James. They're interested in our digital marketplace concept." Victor frowned slightly as Eli approached. "Do we know each other? You look familiar." "I doubt it," Eli said, adjusting his glasses. "I have one of those faces." As the evening progressed, Eli found himself expertly fielding technical questions, careful to dumb down his expertise enough to maintain his cover, while still impressing the investors. When Victor mentioned blockchain integration, Eli had to bite his tongue to avoid revealing that FortressNet had pioneered the exact security protocol they were discussing. "Your developer knows his stuff," Victor told Marcus, nodding approvingly. "Most startups come in with grand ideas and no technical foundation. You've done your homework." As they parted ways, Victor shook Eli's hand, still looking perplexed. "Are you sure we haven't met? Perhaps at the TechCrunch conference?" "Positive," Eli assured him. "I don't really do the conference circuit." Walking home later, Eli felt an unfamiliar contentment. He'd helped secure funding for Marcus's project based solely on his knowledge, not his name or bank account. His phone buzzed with a text from a number he recognized immediately. Miranda. "Whatever spiritual journey you're on needs to wrap up." Masterson moved the meeting up. 9 days and counting. Also, your mother called. Twice. Reality crashed back like a cold wave. In just over a week, this experiment would end. He'd return to board meetings, acquisitions, and a world where relationships came with agendas and prenuptial considerations. As he approached his apartment building, he spotted Zoe sitting on the steps, nursing a cup of coffee and reading a dog-eared paperback. "Zoe, what are you doing here?" She looked up with surprise. "I live here, 4th floor. The real question is, what are you doing here? Marcus said you were staying at the converted warehouse on Bedford." Eli froze, caught in his own web of casual lies. "I, sublet a place here last week. In this building, there's only one vacant unit, 5C. Her eyes widened. "Wait, you took the penthouse?" "It's hardly a penthouse," Eli said defensively, though compared to his usual standards, the modest top-floor apartment was practically monastic. Zoe closed her book, eyeing him with renewed interest. "Web developers don't usually rent the most expensive apartment in Brooklyn on a week's notice." She stood, moving closer. "Who are you really, Eli Adams?" The question hung between them, weighted with implications. For the first time since beginning his charade, Eli felt the dangerous pull to reveal his true self to someone who seemed to like him without knowing about his wealth or status. "I'm just a guy," he said finally, trying to figure out what matters. Zoe stared at him for a long moment before the corner of her mouth lifted in a half-smile. "Aren't we all?" She stepped past him toward the door. "See you tomorrow, mystery man. I've got a feeling there's more to your story than you're letting on." As she disappeared inside, Eli stood in the night air, realizing he'd reached a critical juncture. He was developing real feelings for a woman who didn't know his real identity. Meanwhile, the countdown to his return was accelerating, and the web of deception growing more complex by the day. For all his careful planning, Elliot Ashford had overlooked one critical variable in his experiment: the unpredictable nature of the human heart. The night of the winter exhibition arrived with a flurry of activity. The Brooklyn Arts Center had transformed from an industrial space into a wonderland of light, color, and sound. Eli, dressed in the nicest outfit his struggling developer persona could reasonably own, made final adjustments to the interactive installations before guests arrived. "Systems check complete," he announced to Phoebe, who was fussing with the arrangement of her paintings. "You're a lifesaver," she said, straightening a frame for the 10th time. Seriously, we couldn't have pulled this off without you. Eli felt a strange pride in her words, one completely different from the satisfaction of seeing Fortress Net's stock price climb. This was simpler, more immediate. He had helped create something beautiful with his own hands and knowledge. As the gallery filled with attendees, Eli made his way to the bar where Zoe was mixing cocktails with theatrical flair. She'd traded her usual casual attire for a sleek black jumpsuit, her copper curls swept up to reveal the elegant line of her neck. "What can I get New York's most mysterious web developer?" she asked with a raised eyebrow. "Surprise me," Eli replied, leaning against the bar. But nothing pretentious. Zoe's laugh sent warmth cascading through him. "You know, for someone so opposed to pretension, you're quite the enigma. Marcus thinks you're some kind of tech prodigy hiding from corporate headhunters." Eli tensed. "And what do you think?" Her green eyes studied him as she mixed his drink. "I think," she said slowly, "that people usually have good reasons for keeping secrets." She slid a simple tumbler toward him. "The question is whether those reasons are protecting themselves or others." Before Eli could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught everyone's attention. A tall, immaculately dressed woman with a stern expression was surveying the room with laser-like focus. With horror, Eli recognized Miranda. "I need to..." He gestured vaguely, then disappeared into the crowd before Zoe could respond. Weaving through art enthusiasts, Eli kept his head down, heart hammering. How had Miranda found him? The exhibition wasn't publicly advertised beyond local channels. Someone must have recognized him, despite his disguise. He ducked behind a large sculpture, pulling out his phone to text Miranda, when a familiar voice froze him in place. "Having fun playing commoner, Elliot?" Eli turned to find Calvin Rhodes, his former college roommate and occasional security consultant, looking amused. "How long have you known?" Eli demanded quietly. "Since day 2, Calvin shrugged. "You might have changed your hair and wardrobe, but you still have the same tells when you're analyzing a situation. Miranda hired me to find you discreetly. Does she know I'm here?" "Not yet. I told her I was following a lead in Williamsburg." Calvin studied the gallery. "So this is what billionaires do for fun these days? Volunteer at, community art shows?" Eli ran a hand through his dyed hair. "It's not a game, Calvin." "No? Then what is it? Because from where I'm standing, you're lying to a bunch of nice people who think you're one of them." The blunt assessment hit harder than Eli expected. "It's complicated." "It usually is when feelings get involved." Calvin nodded toward the bar where Zoe was watching them curiously. "That the complication?" Before Eli could answer, Miranda spotted them and marched over, relief, and irritation warring on her face. "There you are," she hissed. "Do you have any idea what I've been dealing with? Masterson is threatening to take the deal to VitalCore if you don't personally assure him of our commitment." "Miranda, not now," Eli warned, conscious of curious onlookers. "Not now. The board is in panic mode. Your mother thinks you've been kidnapped, and you're playing hipster at an art show?" She lowered her voice. 3 days, Elliot. That's all we have before everything you've built starts crumbling." The weight of his real responsibilities pressed down on him. People's jobs, thousands of them, depended on Fortress Net's continued success. Investors had trusted him with billions. He couldn't just abandon that reality, no matter how freeing this temporary escape had been. "I need one more night," he said finally. "I'll be back." "In the office tomorrow." Miranda studied him, then nodded curtly. "Fine, one night." And then Eli Adams disappears as suddenly as he appeared. She glanced around the gallery. This little experiment ends tomorrow. As Miranda departed with Calvin trailing behind, Eli felt a presence at his shoulder. "Friend of yours?" Zoe asked, offering him a fresh drink. "My cousin," Eli lied, accepting the glass. "Family drama." Must be serious drama to follow you to Brooklyn, Zoe observed. She looks like she eats startups for breakfast. That's an accurate assessment, Eli admitted, taking a long swallow of his drink. They stood in silence, watching the exhibition unfold around them. Phoebe was enthusiastically explaining her work to a group of interested buyers. Marcus was networking with potential investors. The community Eli had briefly become part of was thriving, and tomorrow he would leave it behind. "Dance with me," Zoe said suddenly. "What?" "Dance. With me." She set down her glass. "The string quartet is playing, the night is beautiful, and you look like a man who needs to forget his problems for a few minutes." Before he could object, she took his hand and led him to a small space near the musicians, where a few couples were swaying to the music. Zoe stepped into his arms with natural grace, and Eli instinctively placed his hand on her waist, keeping a respectful distance. Zoe rolled her eyes and moved closer. "I don't bite, mystery man." As they moved together, the warm weight of her in his arms felt more real than anything in his usual world of virtual assets and digital empires. Her scent, coffee and flowers, and something uniquely her, filled his senses. "You're a good dancer," she murmured, surprising him. "Another hidden talent?" "My mother insisted on lessons," Eli said truthfully. "Said no son of hers would embarrass her at charity galas." "Charity galas?" Zoe pulled back slightly, studying his face. "Just how many secrets are you keeping, Eli Adams?" The genuine curiosity in her eyes nearly broke his resolve. In that moment, surrounded by art celebrating truth and beauty, the deception felt unbearable. "Zoe, There you are," Phoebe interrupted, breathless with excitement. "Eli, the curator from the Hammond Gallery, loves the interactive installation. He wants to discuss commissioning something similar for their summer exhibition. This could be huge." The joy on Phoebe's face made the words die in Eli's throat. Tomorrow, he would return to being Elliot Ashford tech billionaire. Eli Adams, the man who fixed installations and danced with beautiful baristas, would cease to exist. "That's wonderful," he managed, forcing a smile. "Go," Zoe said, stepping away. "We'll continue our conversation later." As Phoebe dragged him toward the curator, Eli glanced back at Zoe. She stood watching him, arms crossed, a puzzled expression on her face. In just a few days, she had come to mean more to him than women he'd dated for months in his real life. The revelation terrified him. How could he possibly explain who he really was without confirming her worst suspicions? That he was exactly the kind of pretentious fraud he'd been pretending to despise. As the evening progressed, Eli made connections for Phoebe and Marcus, leveraging his business acumen, while carefully avoiding any hints of his true expertise. All the while, he felt Zoe's gaze following him, observant and increasingly suspicious. Near midnight, as the exhibition wound down, Eli found himself helping Zoe pack up the bar. They worked in companionable silence until she spoke. "So when were you planning to tell everyone you're leaving?" Eli nearly dropped the glass he was drying. "What?" "I overheard your conversation with your cousin," Zoe admitted. "Something about an experiment ending tomorrow?" The guilt hit him like a physical blow. "It's complicated." "Isn't it always?" Zoe said quietly. She set down her towel and faced him directly. "Here's what I don't understand. You show up out of nowhere, integrate yourself into our community, make everyone like you, trust you even, and now you're just... what? Disappearing? Was this all some kind of social experiment for you?" The accuracy of her assessment left him speechless. "What I can't figure out," she continued, her voice carefully controlled, "is whether you're running from something or toward something. Either way, the people here deserve better than to be supporting characters in whatever journey of self-discovery you're on." The truth hovered on his lips, but fear held it back. If he told her everything now, Would she see it as justification, or simply more deception? Zoe, I never meant to hurt anyone, especially not you. Yet here we are. She picked up her bag, slinging it over her shoulder. Good night, Eli, or whatever your name really is. As she walked away, Eli felt as though something essential was slipping through his fingers. In less than 2 weeks, he had found a connection more genuine than any he'd experienced in years of wealth and privilege. And tomorrow, he would have to let it go. Unless he found a way to bridge the two worlds he'd created, the billionaire and the ordinary man, he stood to lose what might be his only chance at authentic happiness. Back in his Spartan apartment, Eli stared at his reflection in the bathroom mirror. The dye was fading from his hair, the designer stubble growing unruly. The disguise was wearing thin, just like his justifications. Tomorrow, Elliot Ashford would return to his empire. But perhaps somehow, he could find a way to keep Eli Adams alive too. Elliot Ashford stared at his reflection in the penthouse, bathroom mirror. Gone was the tousled, dyed hair and casual clothes of Eli Adams. The man who gazed back at him wore a perfectly tailored Tom Ford suit, his dark hair expertly styled, his face clean-shaven and immaculate. After nearly 2 weeks of freedom, the corporate armor felt stifling. "Welcome back to reality," he muttered to himself. His private elevator opened directly into Fortress Net's executive floor, where Miranda waited, tablet in hand. "Thank God," she exhaled, visibly relieved. "The prodigal CEO returns. Conference room A, 5 minutes. I've briefed the team, but Masterson wants to hear the strategic vision from you personally." Elliot nodded, slipping effortlessly back into the rhythm of corporate life. As they walked through the glass-walled corridor, employees glanced up with a mixture of deference and curiosity. News of his temporary disappearance had clearly circulated. "We've prepared the standard presentation," Miranda continued. "Conservative growth projections, new security protocols, the European expansion timeline." "Change it," Elliot interrupted. Miranda stopped mid-stride. "I'm sorry?" "The presentation. Change it. I want to discuss integrating communal creative spaces into our satellite offices, partnerships with local artists, a foundation to fund independent tech developers." She stared at him. "Have you lost your mind? Masterson is an old-school venture capitalist. He wants profit margins and market domination, not corporate philanthropy." "Then he's investing in the wrong company," Elliot said firmly. Fortress Net was built on the principle that people deserve both security and authentic connection. It's time we embodied that principle internally. Before Miranda could protest further, Elliot entered the conference room where Jacob Masterson and his team of analysts waited. The white-haired investor rose to his feet, extending his hand. "Ashford, beginning to think you'd vanished permanently. Hope your little sabbatical was illuminating." Elliot smiled, shaking the offered hand. "More than you know, Jacob. It reminded me why we built Fortress Net in the first place." For the next hour, Elliot presented a vision so different from their planned strategy that Miranda repeatedly checked her tablet, as if the correct slides might magically appear. He spoke about community engagement, ethical technology development, and creating work environments that fostered genuine human connection. When he finished, the room was silent. Masterson leaned back in his chair, studying Elliot with shrewd eyes. "That's not the presentation I expected," he said finally. "It's not the company you expected either," Elliot replied calmly. "The question is whether it's a company you still want to invest in." After a tense moment, Masterson laughed. "You've got guts, Ashford. Always have. That's why we backed you when everyone said social media privacy was a contradiction in terms." He closed his portfolio. "Draw up the papers. Masterson Ventures is in, with one condition. Name it. Whatever happened during your sabbatical clearly changed your perspective. Don't lose that clarity. Too many CEOs forget why they started their companies in the first place." As the meeting concluded and handshakes were exchanged, Miranda pulled Elliot aside. I don't know what kind of epiphany you had in Brooklyn, but it just secured us $3 billion in funding, so I'm not complaining. She narrowed her eyes. However, if you ever disappear like that again, I'll personally ensure your mother knows exactly where you are at all times. Noted, Elliot smiled. Now, I need you to clear my schedule for the evening. There's something important I need to do. The inkwell was busy with its usual evening crowd when Elliot pushed open the door. Unlike his previous visits, he made no attempt to blend in. Dressed in his designer suit with his natural hair color restored, he stood out like a peacock among pigeons. Conversations faltered as regulars recognized his face from tech magazines and business news. Marcus, seated at a corner table with his laptop, nearly spilled his coffee when he looked up. Behind the counter, Zoe was focused on the espresso machine, unaware of the disruption. When she turned and saw him, her expression shifted from surprise to understanding to something harder to read. I need to talk to you, Elliot said, approaching the counter. We're a little busy, she replied, her tone carefully neutral. In case you haven't noticed, some of us have jobs we can't just walk away from. The barb landed as intended, but Elliot held his ground. 5 minutes, please. After a moment's hesitation, Zoe nodded to her coworker. Cover for me? She untied her apron and gestured toward the back door. 5 minutes. In the small alley behind the cafe, Zoe crossed her arms, regarding him with guarded eyes. So, Elliot Ashford, tech billionaire and privacy advocate. You knew? Not until this morning when your face was on the business section of the Times. Reclusive tech genius returns, she quoted. Imagine my surprise when I recognized the genius as my mysterious neighbor who claimed to be a struggling web developer. Elliot winced. I can explain. Let me guess. You were bored with your privileged life, so you decided to slum it with the commoners. See how the other half lives? It wasn't like that, he insisted. Then what was it like, Elliot? Or should I still call you Eli? Her voice remained controlled, but hurt flickered in her eyes. Was any of it real? All of it was real, he said quietly. That's what terrified me. The unexpected answer seemed to catch her off guard. I didn't plan for this to happen, Elliot continued. It was supposed to be a simple experiment, living anonymously for 2 weeks, away from people who only valued me for my wealth or influence. He took a step closer. But then I met you, and suddenly the experiment became complicated. Because I didn't know you were rich? Zoe challenged. Because you saw me, really saw me, in a way no one has in years. He ran a hand through his hair, a gesture reminiscent of Eli. You called me out on my pretensions even when you thought I was nobody. You treated me like a person, not a balance sheet. Zoe's expression softened slightly, but skepticism remained. So what now? You've had your walk on the wild side. Time to return to your billion-dollar castle? That depends, Elliot said, gathering his courage. Would you be willing to have dinner with me? Not with Eli Adams, the fake web developer. Not with Elliot Ashford, the tech CEO. Just me, the person you've been getting to know for the past 2 weeks. The guy who loves your reality check coffee and can't dance without counting steps in his head. Zoe studied him for a long moment, her gaze unwavering. You lied to me. To all of us. I did, he acknowledged. And I'm sorry. More than I can say. And now you expect me to just forgive that because you're wearing an expensive suit and making grand gestures. No. Elliot shook his head. I expect nothing. I'm hoping for a second chance, but I'll understand if you think I don't deserve one. The silence between them stretched, filled with the ambient sounds of Brooklyn. Distant traffic, snippets of conversation from passers-by, music drifting from an open window. Finally, Zoe sighed. I get off at 8. There's a taco truck on Bedford that serves better food than any 5-star restaurant you're used to. Meet me there at 8:30. She turned. to re-enter the cafe, then paused. "And Elliot? Wear something that won't get you mugged." As the door closed behind her, Elliot stood in the alley, a smile slowly spreading across his face. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was a start. A chance to rebuild on honest foundations. The taco truck, as promised, served the best food Elliot had eaten in months. Seated on a park bench, dressed in the most casual clothes his wardrobe contained, he watched Zoe laugh at his story of Miranda's reaction to his impromptu corporate restructuring. "So you basically transformed your entire company because of 2 weeks in Brooklyn?" she asked, incredulous. "Not transformed. Realigned," Elliot clarified. FortressNet was always meant to be about helping people connect authentically while maintaining their privacy. Somewhere along the way, I lost sight of the authenticity part. Zoe wiped salsa from the corner of her mouth. "And what? Did your board of directors think about this realignment?" "They're adaptable," Elliot shrugged, "especially when the new direction secures $3 billion in funding." "Must be nice," Zoe mused, "making decisions that affect thousands of people." "It's terrifying, actually," Elliot admitted. "Every choice impacts lives, employees, users, investors. That weight, sometimes it's overwhelming." Zoe regarded him thoughtfully. "Is that why you became Eli? To escape the responsibility?" "Partly," Elliot nodded. "But also to remember what that responsibility means. It's easy to forget the real people behind the metrics and analytics." They walked through the park as night fell, their conversation flowing more easily as the initial tension dissolved. Elliot found himself sharing things he'd never told anyone. His fears about living up to his own success, the loneliness of wealth, his growing disillusionment with the tech world's values. In turn, Zoe told him about her dreams for the Inkwell, her struggles to keep it financially viable while maintaining its community spirit, her complex relationship with her successful older siblings, who viewed her cafe as a hobby rather than a career. When they reached the entrance to their apartment building, Elliot hesitated. "I should probably tell you, I bought the building last week." Zoe's eyes widened. "You what?" "The management company was planning to raise rents by 30% next month. I couldn't let that happen to you, to any of the residents." He hastened to add, "I'm keeping the current rental rates and maintenance team. No one will know there's been a change in ownership." "So you're my landlord now?" Zoe raised an eyebrow. "That's not complicated at all." "Technically, a subsidiary of one of my foundations is your landlord," Elliot clarified. "I wanted to make sure the building stayed affordable for the community, regardless of what happens between us." "And what exactly do you think might happen between us, Elliot Ashford?" Zoe asked, a hint of challenge in her voice. In the softly lit entrance, with the sounds of the city creating a gentle backdrop, Elliot took a chance. He leaned forward and kissed her. Not the practiced kiss of a billionaire accustomed to getting what he wanted, but the tentative, hopeful kiss of a man afraid of losing something precious. To his surprise and relief, Zoe kissed him back, her hands coming to rest lightly on his chest. When they parted, she looked up at him with a mixture of caution and warmth. "This won't be easy, you know. Your world and mine, they're completely different." "They don't have to be," Elliot said softly. "The past 2 weeks taught me that authentic connections transcend circumstances. The question is whether we're brave enough to build something that exists in both worlds." Zoe's smile was cautious but real. "I guess we'll find out." As they entered the building together, Elliot realized that for the first time in years, he was genuinely excited about an uncertain future. He had begun his experiment seeking escape from his life's complexities, only to discover that true fulfillment came not from simplifying existence, but from finding people worth navigating the complications with. The elevator doors closed on Elliot and Zoe, standing side by side, neither the billionaire nor the barista, but simply two people discovering that sometimes the greatest fortune isn't found in bank accounts, but in the courage to be truly seen. "You want to do what?" Miranda's voice echoed through Elliot's penthouse office 6 months later, her expression oscillating between disbelief and resignation. Outside the floor-to-ceiling windows, Manhattan's skyline glittered in the spring sunshine. Elliot leaned back in his chair, unfazed by her reaction. "I want to move FortressNet's innovation lab to Brooklyn, specifically the vacant warehouse next to the Inkwell Cafe." "Let me get this straight." Miranda pinched the bridge of her nose. "You want to relocate our multi-million-dollar R&D division from our state-of-the-art Silicon Alley facilities to a rundown warehouse in Brooklyn. Because it's next to your girlfriend's coffee shop?" "It's not rundown. I've had architects working on the renovation plans for weeks," Elliot clarified, sliding a tablet toward her. "And yes, proximity to the Inkwell is a factor, but not the only one. Brooklyn's creative community is exactly the environment our developers need." Miranda scrolled through the detailed plans, her businessman's eye recognizing the strategic vision behind what initially seemed like a romantic gesture. The designs integrated cutting-edge tech facilities with community spaces, art galleries, and a startup incubator. "This is actually impressive," she admitted reluctantly, "but the board already approved it yesterday." Elliot smiled. "Turns out when your company's stock price doubles in 6 months, the board becomes remarkably flexible. And that flexibility has nothing to do with you controlling 48% of the voting shares?" Miranda raised an eyebrow. "Pure coincidence," Elliot grinned, standing to look out at the city. "The Brooklyn Innovation Campus breaks ground next month. I want you to oversee the project." "Me? I'm your CFO, not a construction manager." "You're the only person I trust to balance the corporate requirements with the community needs," Elliot said, his tone serious now. "This isn't just about building a satellite office, Miranda. It's about creating a new model for how tech companies can integrate with local communities instead of displacing them." Miranda studied him for a moment. "You've really changed. No. 6 months ago, you would have bulldozed that entire block and built a glass monstrosity with your name on it." "I'd like to think I've evolved, not changed," Elliot replied. "Found a better way to be myself. And I suppose the feisty redhead has nothing to do with this evolution," Miranda teased, rare warmth entering her voice. "Zoe has everything to do with it," Elliot acknowledged. "She reminds me daily that authentic success isn't measured in market share." Across the East River, Zoe was facing her own business challenges. Seated at the Inkwell's corner table with Marcus and Phoebe, she reviewed the cafe's financial statements with a grimace. "The numbers don't lie," she sighed. "With the rent increases on the commercial space and the new equipment costs, we're barely breaking even." "What about asking your boyfriend for help?" Marcus suggested. "I hear he has a few dollars to spare." Zoe shot him a withering look. "That's not happening. The Inkwell stands on its own or not at all." "Admirable but potentially self-defeating," Phoebe pointed out, sketching idly on a napkin. "Especially considering that man would buy you the moon if you asked." "Exactly why I can't ask," Zoe insisted. "This relationship only works because we maintain our independence. The moment I become financially dependent on Elliot is the moment the power balance shifts irrevocably." Their conversation paused as the cafe door opened, admitting a stream of suited professionals clutching laptops and tablets. Ever since word had spread that tech billionaire Elliot Ashford frequented the Inkwell, the cafe had gained a new clientele of ambitious entrepreneurs hoping for a chance encounter with the FortressNet CEO. "Speaking of your boyfriend's influence," Marcus nodded toward the newcomers. "They tip well," Zoe shrugged, rising to resume her position behind the counter. "But they're terrible for the ambiance." As the afternoon progressed, Zoe found herself reflecting on the whirlwind 6 months since discovering Eli Adams was actually Elliot Ashford. Their relationship had evolved with surprising naturalness, adapting to the complications of merging their disparate worlds. Elliot still appeared regularly at the Inkwell, sometimes as the polished CEO with security detail waiting discreetly outside, other times in jeans and a t-shirt, joining the regular customers for open mic night. He'd maintained his friendships, with Marcus and Phoebe, offering business advice and technical expertise without ever leveraging his wealth to overshadow their accomplishments. For her part, Zoe had cautiously entered Elliot's world of galas and board meetings, bringing her straightforward perspective to conversations typically dominated by sycophants and strategists. To Elliot's delight, she refused to be impressed by wealth or status, once famously telling a condescending tech mogul that his app had all the user-friendliness of a cactus in a swimsuit. Their relationship wasn't without challenges. Paparazzi regularly stationed themselves outside the inkwell, leading to unwanted publicity. Social media buzzed with speculation about the barista who captured a billionaire's heart, with commentators ranging from supportive to viciously skeptical of her motives. Through it all, they'd established firm boundaries. Zoe refused financial assistance for her cafe, and Elliot respected her need for independence, even when his problem-solving instincts urged him to intervene. As closing time approached, Zoe was wiping down tables when a delivery courier entered, carrying an oversized document tube. "Delivery for Zoe Richardson," he announced, consulting his tablet. "That's me," she confirmed, accepting the package with curiosity. After the courier departed, Zoe opened the tube, extracting a set of architectural blueprints. As she unrolled them across a table, Phoebe and Marcus gathered around. "What is this?" Phoebe asked, examining the detailed drawings. "The Brooklyn Innovation Campus," Zoe read from the title block, her eyes widening as she recognized the location. "This is the warehouse next door. It's being converted into..." She scanned the plans. "A tech innovation center with community spaces? Look at this." Marcus pointed to a section marked the Inkwell Annex. "There's an expansion planned for the cafe, connecting it directly to the Innovation Center's main atrium." Zoe's heart raced as she absorbed the implications. This was clearly Elliot's project, yet he hadn't mentioned it during their dinner the previous evening. Moreover, the plans showed the Inkwell not as an afterthought, but as an integral component of the campus design. "There's a note," Phoebe said, extracting an envelope tucked into the roll. Zoe opened it with trembling fingers, immediately recognizing Elliot's handwriting. "Zoe, this isn't a rescue or a takeover. It's a partnership proposal. The innovation campus is happening regardless, but the Inkwell's integration is entirely your decision. The expansion would remain your independent business, with guaranteed affordable rent for 99 years. Legal details in the attached contract," Miranda insisted. "Your cafe was the heart of a community long before I stumbled into it. I'm simply proposing we grow that community together, on your terms. Meet me on the roof when you're ready to talk." Zoe reread the note twice, emotions conflicting. This wasn't a unilateral decision or a financial bailout. It was an invitation to collaborate as equals. "The roof?" Marcus questioned. "Your apartment roof?" "The building has a garden terrace," Zoe explained, already gathering her things. "We occasionally have dinner there." "Well?" Phoebe prompted, grinning. "Are you going?" Zoe folded the note carefully. "I need to think." The rooftop garden was Elliot's latest renovation to the building. A lush oasis of potted trees, flowering plants, and comfortable seating areas for residents to enjoy. Solar-powered lights illuminated winding pathways, and a small greenhouse housed an herb garden that supplied the Inkwell's kitchen. Elliot stood at the parapet, gazing at the Brooklyn skyline, when he heard the roof access door open. He turned to find Zoe approaching, blueprints clutched under her arm, her expression unreadable. "You could have mentioned this at dinner last night," she said without preamble. "I wanted you to see the complete vision first," Elliot replied. "Not my pitch for it. It's ambitious," she acknowledged, unrolling the plans on a nearby table. "And it would solve the Inkwell's space limitations. But," Elliot prompted, hearing the hesitation in her voice, "but I'm concerned about losing what makes the Inkwell special. If we become the trendy cafe in Elliot Ashford's tech complex, our identity changes fundamentally. Elliot nodded, having anticipated this concern. That's why your space would maintain a separate entrance and branding. The connection to the Innovation Center would be at your discretion. A door you could open or close as needed. And the expansion costs? A business loan from Brooklyn Community Credit Union, arranged by my foundation but with standard terms. Elliot stepped closer. Your cafe? Your rules. I'm just creating an opportunity beside you, not for you. Zoe studied him, searching for signs of the patronizing billionaire she had initially feared he would become. Instead, she found only the man she had grown to love, the unique blend of Elliot's business acumen and Eli's genuine respect for community. You really thought this through, she said finally. I had a good teacher, Elliot smiled. Someone who showed me that authentic connections can exist across different worlds, as long as those connections are built on mutual respect. Zoe moved to stand beside him at the parapet, their shoulders touching as they gazed at the city together. It's a good plan, she admitted, but I have conditions. Name them. The expansion includes a community gathering space for local events, free of charge. Already in the blueprints, Elliot nodded. Page 3, Eastern section. And a scholarship program for young entrepreneurs from the neighborhood. Added to the foundation's mission last month, Elliot confirmed. The first recipients will be announced when the campus opens. Zoe shook her head in amazement. You really have changed. Not changed, Elliot corrected gently. Just found a better way to be who I always was. He turned to face her fully. Which brings me to my final proposal. From his pocket, he withdrew a small box. Not the velvet jewelry box she half expected, but a simple wooden cube with intricate carvings. What's this? She asked, accepting it curiously. Open it. Inside, nestled in a bed of soft fabric, was an old-fashioned key. A key? Zoe questioned, lifting it out. To a cottage in Vermont, Elliot explained. No staff, no security systems, no neighbors for miles. Just a small house by a lake where Elliot Ashford and Zoe Richardson can occasionally disappear and simply be themselves. Zoe turned the key over in her palm, understanding its significance. It wasn't an engagement ring or a grand gesture. It was something far more meaningful. A commitment to preserving the authenticity that had brought them together. I bought it through 7 different shell companies, Elliot continued with a self-deprecating smile. Even Miranda doesn't know about it. It's the one place that will never be part of either of our public lives. Our sanctuary, Zoe murmured, deeply touched by his understanding of what she truly needed from their relationship. Exactly. Elliot took her hands in his. I don't want to change your world or mine. I want to build a new one with you. One where Eli and Elliot, the barista and the billionaire, can all exist together. Zoe's smile bloomed slowly, like a flower opening to unexpected sunshine. That might be the most romantic business proposal I've ever received. Is that a yes to both? Elliot asked, hope evident in his voice. In answer, Zoe wrapped her arms around his neck and kissed him. The kiss of a woman who had found her equal partnership in the most unlikely of disguises. 1 year later, the Brooklyn Innovation Campus hummed with activity as tech developers collaborated with local artists in the central atrium. Through large glass doors, the Inkwell Annex served a steady stream of customers, a seamless blend of tech workers, neighborhood regulars, and creative professionals. In a quiet corner, Miranda sat across from Marcus, reviewing the latest community impact reports. The incubator has launched 28 startups in 9 months, she noted with satisfaction. 70% founded by Brooklyn residents. And the art program has provided fellowships to 15 local artists, Marcus added. The integration is working better than anyone predicted. Don't sound so surprised, Miranda smirked. When Elliot Ashford and Zoe Richardson agree on something, Resistance is futile. Across the atrium, Elliot and Zoe stood observing their successful collaboration, the physical manifestation of the balance they'd achieved between their worlds. "Ready for our escape?" Elliot whispered, subtly revealing the wooden key box in his pocket. "The Vermont forecast calls for 3 days of snow, perfect for disappearing." "Absolutely," Zoe nodded. "Phoebe can handle the inkwell, and Miranda can run the world without you for a weekend." As they discreetly slipped away from the bustle of their creation, Elliot reflected on the unexpected journey that had brought him here. He had disguised himself as an ordinary man to find authentic connection, only to discover that true authenticity meant embracing all aspects of himself, the billionaire and the basic human seeking meaning beyond wealth. Beside him, Zoe squeezed, his hand seeming to read his thoughts. "No disguises needed anymore," she reminded him. "No," Elliot agreed, kissing her temple as they walked toward the unassuming car, waiting to take them to their sanctuary. "Just us, as we really are." In a world obsessed with appearances and status, they had found something rare and precious. A love based not on who they pretended to be or what they possessed, but on the authentic selves they had the courage to reveal to each other. And that, Elliot knew with certainty, was the greatest fortune of all. The end.